Throughout my entire childhood, I played a ton of Nintendo games, especially on the Nintendo 64. From the amazing Mario games to the Zelda games and everything in between, that console gave me countless upon countless hours of fun. But nothing will ever top the amount of time I put into one game called Banjo-Kazooie. That game is such a big part of my childhood, I just don't know what I would do without it. Alright, time to play some Banjo-Kazooie. Where is it? Where's my game? Oh god. If I can't find it, that means I have to play. Banjo-Kazooie was a game that nobody expected to become that big, yet they've become some of the most iconic video game characters in North America. They helped change the platformer industry with one of the most memorable and unique 3D collectathons of all time. Sure, Super Mario 64 was the game that truly revolutionized the genre, but Banjo-Kazooie improved on nearly every aspect. It just doesn't get as much recognition because it doesn't have Mario in the title. But this game had everything. Smooth controls for one of the most annoying analog sticks of all time, diverse worlds to explore that don't feel too similar, amazing characters and dialogue that are still memorable to this day, great music, and most importantly, oh yeah. I could go on and on for hours about this game, but I've already made an entire video on it, so if you want a full review, just go check that out. The main takeaway though is just that this game is incredible and will forever be one of my favorite games with how much of an impact it had on me as a kid. Banjo-Kazooie became a worldwide phenomenon that still gets talked about to this day, but it's also known for having a heaping pile of dog shit game that all but destroyed this beloved franchise. And then there's the game that came right smack dab in the middle of the two that nobody really seems to talk about, even though it has the greatest sequel title of all time. Today, we're taking a look at Banjo-Tooie. Banjo-Tooie was released on November 20th, 2000 in North America, quickly followed by a release in Japan just a week later, but it didn't make its way to Europe until April of 2001. The game was developed by the former greatest development team of all time, Rare, and began development pretty much immediately after Banjo-Kazooie was released in June of 1998. Because the two games were worked on so closely together, many of the ideas that were cut from Banjo-Kazooie were reworked into the sequel, with certain assets for worlds and a multiplayer mode that basically turned this game into Call of Kazooie. But even though they were able to reuse some of the ideas from the original, there were still some great ideas for the sequel that never saw the light of day. The most infamous drop feature is Stop and Swap, which was supposed to allow data to be transferred from Banjo-Kazooie to Tooie. This would have been one of the coolest ideas for any game on the N64, but that was exactly the problem. The feature was supposed to work by collecting eggs in Kazooie, then turn the game off and put in Tooie with 10 seconds to swap the cartridges. But because of the hardware limitations, the time needed to be reduced to 1 second, which was virtually impossible, so the idea was scrapped. The idea was though finally put to use when the games were re-released on the Xbox 360 years later. So at least Microsoft did one thing right. Starting up the game, you will immediately notice the most dramatic difference between this and the first game. You see it? There is no intro of everyone jamming out. What the f is even the point of playing anymore? That was easily my favorite opening for any game, but I will give them a pass because it doesn't actually affect gameplay. The game opens up on a dark, stormy night 2 years after Grunty's defeat in the first game, where Banjo and the boys are playing poker. Tremors start out of nowhere, and a digging machine called the Hag-1 comes out of the ground, being piloted by Grunty's sisters, who are just as ugly, if not uglier than her, which is saying a lot. By the way, their names are Mangella and Blobelda, which might even be worse names than Gruntilda too. They dig her way out, and even though Grunty is nothing but bones and robes, she is somehow still alive after 2 years of being under a boulder. You'd think that would make her lose weight, yet she's still somehow fat with literally no fat. Her sisters tell her that they have a plan to restore her body, but then Mumbo sees them because of course he's out there. So Grunty chases him, firing spells until Mumbo hides inside that house. Gruntilda starts to power up a strong spell, so Banjo, Kazooie, and Mumbo all flee while Bottles just sits there like an idiot thinking it's another trick in their poker game. I'm sure Grunty will just miss or something. There's no way they would kill off Bottles. Holy shit! They actually killed him! I can't believe of all the characters to kill, they chose the most annoying, dorky, and useless. Yeah, okay, it was probably the right choice. Bottles turns into a ghost, so he doesn't have nearly as big of a role as he did previously, but they did actually have an early game mode that used this idea of Bottles as a ghost incredibly well. They planned for a mode called Bottles Revenge, where a second player could actually play as Bottles' ghost and take control of enemies to fight against Banjo. Yes, you heard that right. It was almost a complete versus mode, and if the enemy did defeat Banjo, you would swap roles, which made it actually competitive. Even bosses were supposed to be playable, which could have honestly been the coolest idea from any platformer ever. Sadly, they did have to scrap the idea because they ran out of time to debug it, but according to the developers, quote, it did work rather well. I hope if they ever do make a Banjo 3E, they make this mode work because I would love to beat the shit out of my friends as a mosquito. Now that we're about to really dive into the gameplay mechanics for this game, you'll quickly notice that it's not really that much different from Banjo-Kazooie. Because the game is a direct sequel using many of the same assets as its predecessor, the core gameplay is nearly identical. The game takes place in a grand 3D world to explore and search for Jiggies in order to access the next world. However, even though that might sound like exactly the same thing, they made one slight change that I just absolutely adore. Banjo-Kazooie just had you get teleported to every world in the game just like pretty much every Mario game, which I have no problems with. But Banjo-Tooie did what I always commend Paper Mario for by making the world much more connected, with every world seamlessly transitioning from the hub world. This is how any adventure exploration game should create their world. Start you in some central hub, then give you access to a vast world that isn't split into multiple subsections. That's what made Breath of the Wild so great. Although to be fair, that was a bit more expansive than Banjo-Tooie. Like I said, I don't mind the warps to different worlds because it has worked amazingly for many games. But you can't deny that it gives the world more depth to not have those loading screens disguised as level select screens. Can you imagine if the real world was like that? Whew, I need some fresh air. Let's go outside. Oh, f***, it's cold. And the worlds are still incredible, just like the first game, with every single one of them being at least twice the size of Banjo-Kazooie. Just like how the first game had everything from a beach to a haunted mansion, all the way to a cavern with a giant robotic fish, Banjo-Tooie has worlds from the prehistoric era, the Industrial Revolution, and stripped straight from Super Mario 64 with Jolly Roger's Lagoon. Okay, the worlds are vastly different, but I am convinced they at least stole the name because it's just way too similar. Unlike Banjo-Kazooie, you don't use the Jiggies to complete a painting to access all of the worlds. Instead, you need to take them to Master Jiggy Wiggy, yes, that is his actual name, who will force you to play a timed puzzle challenge to enter the next world. And just like how Jiggies play a big role again, so do musical notes, albeit in a much different way. You now use the notes to learn new moves from Bottle's brother, Jam Jars, who is a drill sergeant and couldn't be any more different from his dorky brother. Every ability you had in the first game is immediately usable, but some of the new abilities that you can learn are some new egg types, turning Kazooie into an assault rifle, and play as Banjo or Kazooie separately with new moves on their own. But who gives a shit about all that, because you can play as Mumbo Jumbo and use magic, which is the greatest idea Rare might have ever had. Sadly, he doesn't transform Banjo and Kazooie anymore, and instead a new character named Humbo Wumba, who is more or less Mumbo's rival. Never in my life would I have thought Mumbo would have a Native American transforming magic witch as a rival after the first game, but I guess weirder things have happened to this series. Although I do not like her as much as Mumbo, I gotta be fair and say the transformations she gives you are far better than the first game for the most part. You can turn into a dragon, a dinosaur, a soccer mom van, and even a washing machine for some damn reason. Turning into a pumpkin from the first game was weird, but this might be even weirder. The game overall just has so many more characters to talk to with so much more input than one or two words like before. Anyone who has watched my videos before knows that this is something that I just love, giving characters more depth and reason to talk to other than just because it's required. All the writing for this game is great with charm you rarely find, especially in a sequel trying to grasp that same experience from the first game. But in exchange for this charm, the developers did the unthinkable, nastiest, and unforgivable thing any game has ever done. They got rid of the eyes on the Jiggies and notes, and more importantly, they removed the best part of the game. Banjo no longer dances when he collects a Jiggy. What the f*** is the point of playing this game anymore? First you take away the game's intro, and now this? You make such great changes with charm to all the new characters, but then take away the animation that gave the most charm to any character in the entire game. That's like taking away the dance Mario does after he grabs a star. Just picture if this is how you collected a star in Mario 64. Would have been pretty fucking lame, right? Luckily, that's really the only major thing that's a disappointment in this game, because the rest is nearly flawless. The ending showdown with Gruntilda sort of follows a similar path that Banjo-Kazooie did. She forces you to complete the Tower of Tragedy quiz, which is basically just Grunty's Furnace Fun 2.0. But when you complete it, Gruntilda kills her sisters for losing. This game really is way darker than the first, and I never realized it as a kid. You chase her up the top of the tower where the final showdown against Grunty in the Hag 1 finally begins. This battle feels a little more intimidating than the first, but I gotta be honest, something about it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the multiple completely different phases that Banjo-Kazooie had, and it just doesn't feel as climactic. Maybe it's because you were trying to save your sister in the first game, which made it more of a personal attachment, and I just couldn't give a damn about this fat witch bitch. Gruntilda is finally defeated and her own spell rebounds and blows up her ship, leaving her as just a disembodied head, yet she somehow doesn't die. She somehow survives the Ginginator, a giant boulder, and getting blown up, but Bottles got one shot by her spell. Bottles is even more of a weakling than I thought. She then speaks the infamous line of her getting her revenge in Banjo-Tooie, which I just can't wait for. I need to see how they take the story from here. Damn it! Banjo-Tooie didn't shake up the collectathon industry like its predecessor did, but as a sequel, it hit the nail on the head as any good series should possibly do. As opposed to Nuts and Bolts, which hit the head on the coffin to kill this damn series. This game took nearly everything from Banjo-Kazooie and either expanded or improved upon it. The worlds are larger and more fun to explore, the characters have more depth and interactions, the moveset is much more diverse and fun to use, and you can play as Mumbo. What more could you ask for? Maybe a fucking jiggy dance, but that's besides the point. You definitely could make the argument that Tooie is the superior game, but personally, I just don't think it can quite top Kazooie. I might be biased since I played Banjo-Kazooie first and have played it way more times, but it's my opinion and my video, so deal with it. But this is definitely a game that you should check out if you've played Banjo-Kazooie, or even if you haven't and just learned about them from Smash Ultimate. Get the Rare Replay version and play it on the Xbox 360 because you will not regret it. Go and enjoy the Rare from my childhood and avoid the madness that they have released recently. Let's just hope that one of these days Rare can finally go back to their good old ways before the dark times. I mean, Banjo has found his way into Smash, so at least we're on the right direction. If we pray hard enough, maybe finally some luck will come our way. Oh shit! I am your genie, and I can grant you 3 wishes. Oh sweet, could I get infinite wishes? Just for that, you're down to 1. Damn it, then could I get Skyward Sword HD? Come on, be a little more realistic here. Okay, well then could I get Banjo 3E? So how soon do you want Skyward Sword HD?